Hal Kempfer, hi, thank you for joining me today. So we're we're placing a big gamble on this one, but we're going to talk a little about the COVID-19 and how it's affected casinos and what casinos will need to do to open back up. Because obviously casinos, there have a lot of people, there's a lot of touching, and that seems to be a very vulnerable industry. But you've already started talking to people about it, advising some casinos in Las Vegas. Can you talk a little about what you've talked to them about in terms of protecting against the COVID-19 and how to prepare to reopen?
Well, Leighton, I can to a certain extent. You have to remember there is that Nevada state law
Okay.
that says whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So I just want to remind you that. But so whatever those legal provisions. But no, to put it this way, and figuring out what the casinos are doing with COVID-19, they're gauging the odds, if you will. It's interesting. I've probably trained. I do a lot of work out there training. It's under a public, kind of a public-private thing that reaches out to the entire resort industry. So I've had participants in training and things that workshops and things I do from probably all the major properties across Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
In various different capacities, mostly security, safety, but also in, marketing, sales, administration, operations, all sorts of stuff, over many years. And I have a long background working with Las Vegas Metro, their police department, and especially on the counterterrorism side.
Mm-hmm.
With that, there's been a dialogue going back and forth on what to do. Now, you may have seen that Caesars and Wynn have put out extensive plans on how they plan to reopen.
Mm-hmm.
Wynn is doing some very good things. One is they're testing their workforce repeatedly to make sure that they're COVID-19 negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you, my hat's off to them. I talked to all the groups out there at one point, but I'd mentioned that they're going to have to do repeated testing of their workforce. That's part of it.
Now, when you say repeated, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you say repeated testing, what's the frequency on the repeated testing?
Probably at least a couple of times a week. We've been saying 2 to 3 times a week. Yeah, just to make sure that they are truly. It's not so much that they're COVID negative, that they're not contagious.
Right.
Even you can't with 100% certainty say if someone tests negative that they won't walk out a few hours later and somehow contract the virus and become infected. What you can do is you can say it's going to take a certain period of time for that virus to incubate to the point where they're shedding virus or they're contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're, pardon the expression, you're again playing the odds. You're trying to figure out what is that time. And you're never going to be 100% perfect, but that's part of it. The other thing too is if you're asymptomatic, you can be contagious, but you're more contagious if you're symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're coming to work and you're coughing and sweating, you're much more contagious than if you're coming to work and you're not coughing and sweating. All right. Mm-hmm. If you feel fine, you may have virus, but we can kind of control that in other ways. And just maintain protocols of cleaning your hands and being careful about not touching your face and eyes and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that can be done to mitigate that spread of transmission. But if you're testing every 2 or 3 days, statistically, the chances that you're going to contract the virus or be infected with the virus and be shedding the virus and making others infected, you've reduced that dramatically. So that's one of the things they're doing. They're checking temperatures, symptom, and obviously, if someone's coughing, I don't know if they're doing this. I don't think they're doing automated means. If someone's coughing, they would probably just go up to an employee and say, "Hey, you're coughing. You need to get out of here." And so they're and truth is, if you have hay fever, you'll probably be forced to isolation until you can test you and prove that you're not COVID-19 positive. So we're doing that with the workforce. They're doing social distancing in the buildings themselves, at the restaurants, in the casinos. They're going to try and put as much distance between people We've seen some of this concept. I do a lot of things where, on television, more Zoom and Skype these days. We don't actually go to the studio, but it's interesting to watch the anchors, because when this started breaking out in March, all of a sudden you saw the anchors sitting 6 feet apart. In fact, one time before we went on the air, like during the commercial break, they'll pop up and go, "Hey, Hal," and we'll talk for a little bit. They go, "Look, we're 6 feet apart." I go, "Wow, that's pretty good." I said, "I got 2 feet. I'm 30 miles from the station." So, but they're putting a spread or space between themselves, and we're going to see a lot of that in the restaurants, in the casinos. You're going to see the same thing they're doing in stores, where you'll see social distance lines before you can get in. And it was interesting. I was talking this morning with a friend of mine, and we're talking about they may actually have implement a system, and it's going to irritate some people, but it's a system where they're going to vet who will go to the casinos. If you can only let so many people in a casino, unfortunately, the person that likes to play quarter slots may have to stay out, and the whale that likes to go in and drop 100 or 200 on a hand of poker, without hesitation, they're going to go in. All right. Now, with some of the games, like with the in disinfection of spaces, all right, cleaning and things along those lines. With the machines, that's pretty easy to do. You go in, you wipe it down, you clean it off, and after everybody uses it, they go over and wipe it down, clean it off. So it's been disinfected and cleaned. So you're not really going to have a worry about viral transmission from a surface contact. All right. With certain games, it gets to be a little bit more. Well, for example, with craps, it can be a little more dicey. Okay.
we need a drummer here. Ba-bum bum.
Okay. So anyway, one thing that ends, this blowing on the dice thing.
Oh.
Not great in a viral intense environment. So it's not clear how dice would work in that environment. Roulette probably wouldn't be a problem. There has been a lot of discussion about what to do about the chips, and obviously disinfecting the chips, but also putting some sort of antimicrobial substance on the chips to make the chips virus resistant. So, for example, if you have the virus on your fingers or hands and you touch the chip, it actually has something that will destroy the virus on the chip.
And I know we talked about cylinder, but can you remind us how long that lasts when you put that on a chip or a surface?
That's one of the things we're working out. For example, with one substance, if you put it on a tabletop, it's good for about a day, about 20-24 hours.
Okay.
So with a chip, you put on a chip, I would think if you did that on the chips like a couple times a day, that would probably work. Don't quote me on that. Right. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just saying that would seem to be consistent with what I've seen.
Right.
And so that would reduce the chance. Of course, you have to have certain protocols. Like, for example, when you go up there, you're going to have a Purell bottle probably right there. And they would say every time you touch your chips or whatever, make sure you clean your hands and do all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of little protocols you're going to have put in place for things like that. Cards has been a big discussion. How do you do cards?
Right.
The thought is, well, the dealers can wear gloves. Oh, I know the dealers are going to love that. It's going to be tough to deal cards. And then when you're, and it depends, certain games you're just not going to be able to really pull this off very well. But you give them cards, and then they can touch the cards. But once the cards go back, those cards are done for the day. You cannot use those cards again, because you're either going to have to go back, either destroy them or you're going to have to disinfect them. But you cannot bring them out. And with disinfection, with cards, the only thing that I've seen that seems to be possible is using the UV light disinfection. Okay. But that takes a while. The UV light has to actually be bathed in that light for a while to kill all the virus and anything else that's on the card.
When you say has to be in that light, a couple hours, couple minutes?
I would say in hospital rooms, I was thinking they were talking like 20, 30 minutes when they
Okay.
do it in hospital rooms. They bring in those lights to disinfect the room with UV.
Uh-huh.
So for cards, I'm guessing, probably something equivalent to that,
Okay.
to just to be sure, to be truly on the safe side.
Right.
Cards. So that's, we've talked about maybe putting antiviral stuff on cards. At some point, you're dealing with the integrity of the card.
Right.
So, I don't know if that's how well that will work. Of course,
Has
the
it-
other side too, this may be the golden age for electronic poker and stuff like that, because again, if you're doing the machine, you just clean the machine off, and there's really no problem there.
I would think that getting back to the cards, I was wondering with the shuffling machines, because most of the casinos use shuffling machines. If there's a UV light in the shuffling machine, maybe that could be.
I don't think I'm not an expert.
Right. We're just speculating.
But I think you'd have to have a significant amount of light on the card, because what you're doing is you're actually you're destroying the cells, is what you're doing, light.
Right.
And so it has to have enough exposure on the card to kill whatever on there, to wipe out the virus or bacteria or whatever's on the card.
Right.
So, it's just, I don't know. That's something to be worked out. We've talked about it. I've talked about it with various different properties and organizations back in Las Vegas about this. I can't say anybody's come up with a great answer yet, but it's been discussed quite a bit. So
Now, we've talked about discussion, but how far have they gotten to having implementing some of the stuff that we've talked about for another topic? How close are they implementing a lot of stuff that they need to? How much planning's been, not just planning, but execution has there been? And do you know if there's a timetable when Vegas might be able to open up and what that might look like?
Well, with Las Vegas, with certainly some of the properties, they're looking at weeks. Maybe
Weeks.
they're actually, I've seen some stuff we're looking at mid-May. I don't know if that's going to be actually going to happen. That's coming up pretty fast. But it's going to be, it's probably, I heard May 15th bounce around a bit. Sometime in latter May. Some of the properties, maybe not all the properties, but there is a big push to open them up. The concern, and this is true with any casino, you can always take shortcuts, with the reopening, but you got to remember the nature of the venue is people are going to come together. They're going to be touching common surfaces. They'll be in close proximity. There's just a lot of opportunities for transmission of the virus from one person to another. And with that, even if you were in, shall we say, compliance with the procedures, the problem is if you have a casino and there's a cluster outbreak that's associated with that casino, no matter where you stand in the public health rules or whatever else, if the perception is that your casino is someplace that's bad where you can have a big outbreak, people are not going to go there.
Yeah.
People are not going to put themselves at risk.
Another big gamble that they're placing, opening up.
So to speak, yes.
Yeah. Because I don't know, for me, everyone has to assess what risk is worthwhile. To me, that just seems like a big risk because, that would erode your brand. I would guess if you had that.
I would assume so. And really where you see this is in restaurants. If there's a restaurant that has some sort of, like a hepatitis A outbreak or something associated with food poisoning, whatever, they can take care of that right away. It doesn't matter. That perception sticks in people's minds, and they will just say, I'm going to stay away from that place for a while.
Right.
And sometimes they'll stay away from it long enough that the place will go under. Yeah. One of the more famous instances was up in Oregon, along the Columbia River. There was a town near a cult compound, and this cult, the Rajneeshis, actually went into town and they put was it a virus? It was a virus into the salmonella into the salad dressings of restaurants that had salad. They would go pour a little vial and pour it into the salad dressing and then mix it up. All right. And what they're trying to do is to make the town residents sick so they wouldn't vote in the next election. And they brought in a bunch of people to vote in the next election, and they were basically trying to take over local government. So they did a test run. They got a lot of people really sick. Nobody died. A couple of people came very close to dying,
Oh,
but
boy.
nobody died. But nobody knew that it was a terrorist attack, a bioterrorist attack.
Oh, wow.
All they knew was that some restaurant, a couple, 3 restaurants in town had a problem. I know at least one, and I think 2 of those restaurants went under.
Oh, boy.
Would not go back. They didn't know what it was. They'd gone through, they cleaned everything up, they changed everything. Didn't matter. People associated that restaurant with that salmonella outbreak. That was enough. They would not go back, and the restaurants went under. That's a concern with opening up any of these large resort venues. If we've seen this with cruise ship industry, and they have some pretty good numbers out there. When norovirus broke out, Legionnaire's disease, norovirus, all the stuff broke out. That really impacted their revenues for a long time, because people were sitting there going, I'm not going to go on a ship if I'm going to die. I'm not going to go on a cruise ship if I'm going to get this horrible disease, norovirus. And they would just hold off doing that. And that goes right to the bottom line. I think the cruise industry is going to have a really difficult time coming back.
Yeah. No,
but they're going to have a tough time. So,
getting back to the casinos, I just remember when you go to the casinos, it was just wide open. You could walk in, you could walk out. There's no real doors to kind of control, where it's like earlier we're talking about sports venues. There's one entrance. You had to go through a metal detector after 9/11, but not necessarily something like that with the casinos. I would imagine that would have to change, but is that something that would have to change? And what are some of the other little changes that maybe casinos will have to make, because they were very open to get in and out, and it seems like they'd have to address that some way to change the culture.
Well, it's interesting with casinos. It used to be like in Las Vegas, part of that open field, come on in and gamble. I think there's a few places left downtown in Las Vegas, but they didn't even have doors on the casinos. They used it was like an air wall is what they call it, and it would blow air down. It'd be air conditioned inside, but they'd actually blow heavy curtain of air, so that when you walked in, you could actually walk in off the streets. You got to remember, in the summertime, it gets awful hot out there. But you could walk in off the street into the casino itself. And so you didn't even have to go through a door. Now you don't really see that anymore. Certainly on the Strip, all the casinos have doors that you got to go through. But you're right, a casino by design is really a very open place. I think that's going to go away. I think what you're going to see is it's almost like going to a club. You're going to have to go in a line, and they're going to have to check you. In this case, they're going to have to check you for symptoms. They may even have to check you to see if you've had a recent PCR test, COVID test, to find out if you're positive or negative. There may be a series of steps, almost like the public health version of the TSA checkpoint, not quite that extensive, but just to make sure if you're going in that you're not coughing or sweating, to find out if you are COVID positive or negative. One time it was interesting. They were thinking with the serology tests or antibodies that they might actually be able to issue some sort of get out of jail free card, public health passport, says you had this at one time, so you got antibodies, so now you're immune to it. And I remember when this first came out, and I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, but I said, okay, if you get antibodies, you're resistant to the virus. Does that mean you can't be reinfected and possibly contagious again? And you kind of got this sort of equivocating of maybe not. It was like, well, we need to, before we start issuing any public health passports or whatever, we need to figure out if that's actually truthful, because it's great that they're not going to get seriously ill if they got antibodies, but if they're reinfected and they're shedding virus, I don't want them coming into my casino or my building and shedding virus all over the place if I can avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
So some of our initial assumptions on how this might work, which is, you show your, public health thing. I got antibodies, come on in, that's probably not going to happen. I think what you're going to see is there will be kind of like what you see at stores. There'll be social distancing, spacing, and then there'll be some screening process to probably come through in order to control it. If they keep it wide open, then they're just going to have to do some sort of distributed enforcement to make sure that people are maintaining a certain amount of social distancing and wearing masks and things like that and cleaning their hands and stuff. And it's going to be either way, you're going to have to put resources to deal with this.
One thing that you mentioned with the, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the old days is just come on in and have fun.
Right.
Not while this thing's out there.
Yeah. The one thing that you talked about the distancing, I forgot to follow up on when we spoke about it earlier, but like say a blackjack table.
Yeah.
How many people on a table now? I think right now it's 6 to 8 on a table when you're playing now. I mean, are they looking at like maybe 2 players on a table? Because
here's the thing. I'm take a blackjack table. All right. Okay. How far do we need to separate the players?
Right.
6 feet apart. All right. Right away, that tells you, a blackjack table potentially could have only 2 players, maybe 3 most. All right. Probably 2.
Yeah.
On each end.
Right.
And then the other thing is you got the dealer. Okay. The dealer might be, depending on the distance, you might want to have like a plexiglass screen.
Right.
Like you see at stores with the dealer. All right. And they're doing their stuff down here with the cards, but the screen would be up here. And of course, they'd be wearing a mask. Those playing would be wearing masks. It'd be an interesting.
Are they actually looking? It's just kind of crossed my mind when you said that. Are they looking at maybe creating plexiglass pods so you could have 6 people on a table?
It's interesting you bring that up. There's been some discussion about that. Just we put them in little ice. Well, first off, when they go in, you have to disinfect it every time someone goes into a pod, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the issues, and this was being brought up because some thoughts were, well, maybe we could do this for restaurants too and stuff. You got to look at the fire code, which is, can we? Okay, so you got them in the plexiglass thing. Are we now in violation of the fire code? Have we left a big enough lane for people to get out? Are we? There's a lot of considerations to go into that. And then, the part of it is, it's like, oh, great, we blocked air movement between the players. Well, then the question is, okay, what's the air temperature in this little pod thing going to be like after a while? Is this dead air? I mean, you really sit down and all of a sudden, the temperature in the casino is about 72 degrees. And in your little pod, it's cooking in the low 80s or something. Over a period of time, that would get a little uncomfortable. And they say, well, you put a fan in there. Well, you put a fan in there, guess what you just defeated? The whole purpose for having the pod, because now you're spreading virus around the room. So there's a lot of the plexiglass block on the dealer makes a lot of sense.
Right.
I'm not sure about whether that would work. I'm sure someone's thinking it because, we get more players per table.
Right.
That makes sense. But I think we're going to, with everything, same with shows. Shows are another issue, which is how are you going to do shows?
Oh, yeah.
Social distance. What does that mean? Well, you have to block out certain seats. So, looking at this, I was talking to a major sports venue about seating. I said, you may have to get comfortable with a full stadium being about a third or a fourth of what you normally have. By the time you block out enough seats to create enough social distance between attendees or fans, you've blocked out a lot of seats.
Old Clippers, that was no problem.
Huh?
The old Los Angeles Clippers, that's no problem.
No, that's fine.
Social distance was no problem with the old LA Clippers.
That is so wrong. That is so wrong.
And again, I want to say old LA Clippers.
There you go. The old LA Clippers, yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing that we're talking about the casinos was cleaning and sanitizing the slot machines. It's easy to do, but the difficult thing that kind of strikes me is that you need a lot more manpower than you have right now, because there's a lot of slot machines, there's a lot of players. And the other thing that, in talking about that is, casinos are open 24 hours. I mean, do they have to limit their hours so they can sanitize it more effectively? I mean, where are they with that discussion?
You're asking all the right questions. I don't think we have an answer on that yet. I think at some point, and there's already been this. I can't tell you exactly what each casino is going to do in Las Vegas,
Hmm.
but there has been a lot of discussion worked in that sections of casinos will probably be closed off
Hmm.
while they do a daily disinfection. All right, so they'll close off a section, and if you're doing something like hydrogen peroxide fogging, for example,
Hmm.
you got to close off a huge area because that stuff you just don't want anybody around when you're using it.
Hmm.
It's not pleasant. Let's just put it that way. All right.
Okay.
So you'd have to close off a lot of area to do that. So you might see, sometime in the wee hours of the morning, they may close off the entire casino for a couple hours
Yeah.
and just shut it down. All right.
Yeah.
That may be the easiest way to do it. But you actually bring up a great point, which is how about the machines themselves?
Hmm.
And what you're kind of looking at is you're going to have a lot of people standing by to clean, or you're going to have to provide some sort of cleaning materials
Hmm.
at every machine, and have a sign or something that says when you're up there you got to clean down before you start and clean down after you leave, and maybe leave it up to individuals to do their own thing.
That doesn't
Uh,
work at gyms, so I can't see that working at casinos.
yeah, that's the same issue I see too. I don't see that working well. What I see is you have people standing by, and the moment somebody gets up to leave from a machine, they rush over there and clean the place down
Hmm.
and get it ready for another thing. One thing, and I don't think they're going to do this, but one thing I was thinking was in some of the big parking garages,
Hmm.
they'll have the little green and red lights that tell you if
Right.
a slot's open so you can see it. There might be something where they do that in casinos
Hmm.
to tell you if a machine is ready for use or not for use.
Hmm.
There might be some sort of signaling system that would, and that's actually, that'd be easy to do because you can do that with proximity sensors.
Hmm.
So someone's sitting there playing the machine, and then they get up and leave,
Hmm.
boom, red light, not ready for use, not ready for use. All
Right.
right. And when it's all cleaned down, they'd be something where they hit a card or do something, and boom, all of a sudden it goes green light, it's ready for use. You
Hmm.
know,
Seems like they're just talking about this. Seems like there's a bit, earlier we were talking about sports venues and opening up sports, but it seems like there's a bigger investment required or needed for casinos because, everything that makes them so great are what makes you so vulnerable to the COVID
Mhm.
virus, more so than sporting events. So,
Well, and I'm gonna say the casinos themselves, everywhere in there,
mhm.
all the tables need to be hit. Everything, the restaurants are going to
Mhm.
be social distanced. Everything with that. I think you're going to have to see a certain amount of creativity
Mhm.
in this. There might be something where they, room service might take a whole new meaning. If
Mhm.
room service at a resort is the primary way that people are going to eat, then they may have to really up their game on room service. It's not by exception, it's the rule that most
Mhm.
people eat by room service. So they may have to start doing things to make it more enticing. They may have to get some furniture in the rooms they didn't previously have. There may
Mhm.
be a whole bunch of things that they want to do to change the whole concept of how they do room service. Also, the rooms themselves, they're going to have to get much more serious about. I mean, everything gets changed out.
Mhm.
Somebody's in a room, you've got to change it out. All the bedding's got to get changed out 100%.
Mhm.
Bedspreads, which very rarely get cleaned. That's why they say try not to lie in a bedspread because, well, they're gonna. That's one, that's one where they probably look at that persistent antimicrobial,
Mhm.
and with some of the stuff in terms of how long it stays in fabric are pretty impressive.
Mhm.
If you put it in fabric, it stays there for a very long time. So you might see that as part of the normal thing they do is spray down the bedspread with antimicrobial substance,
Mhm.
change out all the bedding on a regular basis,
Mhm.
you know, um, you know, um, just everything. I'm not saying they don't change out bedding, but some hotels they won't change out everything every day, and
Mhm.
they have to start being much more involved with that. And you might see when someone moves out, the guys come in with gas masks and PPE, and they do a hydrogen peroxide fogging of the room,
Mhm.
and just to make sure everything's disinfected there. So,
You make me want to go get a black light before I go to Las Vegas and get a room. You run the
bad
black
idea.
light.
By the way, if you thought that black lights reveal scary things at Halloween, wait till you go to a hotel room.
Oh, I've heard. It'll freak me out.
Yeah. Just do the black light on the TV remote. That'll scare the hell out of you. I know. I got to tell you, I've been doing this for years. First thing I do when I go to a hotel,
Mm-hmm.
I get a wipe and I clean the remote off. Yeah, because that's one of the most disgusting things that you'll find. I mean, they're just little viral petri dishes that also change the channel.
You're going to give me nightmares now. Well, I think that's going to cover it for right now. Hal, thank you for joining me. But before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add that maybe we might have missed?
I just think that the resorts and casinos are going to have to, again, weigh the investment and what it takes to control, prevent, mitigate the transmission of virus and keeping their facilities safe for their customers against the cost of having to shut down. It's going to cost money. Testing, all the technology, all the extra personnel for cleaning, all the additional cleaning and disinfection, all these things, they all cost money. But being shut down costs a lot of money too.
Costs a lot more money too.
Well, it really does, and they're going to have to weigh that. I think with some, they're like, well, we can do this, and we'd be in kind of compliance with what public health is saying. Really, I hate to say it, but as you've said a few times with the casinos, that sort of thinking is a real gamble.
Yeah.
All right. If you're throwing the dice and you're saying, well, maybe people won't associate us with something bad. If a lot of people get sick and some people die, that's something that lasts for a long time. That's an impression.
Yeah. A lot of things we got to weigh. Well, Hal, again, thank you so much for talking with me about this. It was very educational and very scary, but very necessary. So, Hal, thanks again for all your time, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon, okay?
Okay, thanks, Leighton.
Thanks, Hal. Really appreciate it.